Hello and welcome to This Really Happened, a place where unbelievable, heart-touching true stories come to life. Sometimes surprising, sometimes bittersweet, always real. Grab a drink and settle in. We're about to begin. An elusive scent, commonly known as luxury, hung in the air. It was a blend of lightness, arrogance, and an almost weightless haze. The skillful hands of expert craftsmen had combined the warmth of wood, the sweetness of vanilla, and a barely perceptible note of tropical flowers in this captivating fragrance. Recreating such an aroma within the walls of one's own home somehow never worked. This is how it smells in the lobbies of expensive hotels, in the halls of exquisite restaurants, or in the spaces of famous brand boutiques. "I could just sit here in this armchair forever," Maisie said dreamily, her gaze fixed on the bubbles dancing in her glass of champagne. In moments like these, you start to believe the whole world revolves just around you. "I don't know about the whole world, but that sales assistant definitely does," Lola nodded towards the store employee. Meanwhile, the assistant, as if gliding across the floor, approached the friends, carrying an armful of dresses. "I'm going to try these on." Maisie carefully placed the glass of unfinished champagne on a nearby table and disappeared behind the fitting room curtain. The obliging employee readily held up the hem of her own skirt, eager to please the client in every way. "When is the big event?" Lola asked, elegantly crossing one leg over the other. "Oh, it's just in a couple of days," came a muffled voice from behind the curtain. "Some friend of Ryan's proposed to his lady, and they decided to celebrate it in style. You know, like in American movies. There'll be a cocktail party, a huge fireworks display, live music. He rented a luxurious villa out of town with a pool and garden, just for this. So I simply have to show up there with Ryan looking my absolute best." "I wish I lived like that," Lola sighed languidly, finishing her champagne. "If they're spending this much on an engagement, what will the wedding itself be like?" Maisie pushed aside the curtain with a jingle and appeared before her friend in a dress completely covered in sequins, with a daringly open back. The sales assistant immediately began praising the choice enthusiastically. Lola critically surveyed her friend and frowned slightly. There were still plenty of outfits on the rack. There was absolutely no need to rush. After 2 more glasses of sparkling wine, the friends finally left the shopping centre with their coveted purchase and headed towards the parking lot exit, waiting for a taxi. Maggie had tied her fate to a promising man about 6 months ago. Ryan held the position of director at a prestigious car dealership. Maggie wasn't at all shy about telling her friends how she had taken him from a plain-looking nurse. As soon as their relationship was legalized, she herself immediately quit her job and began hatching plans for her own small business. She felt no remorse for her actions. On the contrary, she believed she had simply taken from the grey mouse what had, by some absurd accident, ended up near her. Lola listened attentively, but was not in a hurry to repeat Maggie's feats. She believed in the unseen law of retribution and preferred to rely on her own strength. "Now we need to get shoes. That's at a different boutique. I called them, and they promised to set them aside until I arrive. So we need to—" Maisie's lively chatter suddenly stopped short. "Need to what?" Lola looked up at her friend, and only now noticed that she had frozen, her gaze fixed on something in the parking lot. The girl followed her gaze. Near an expensive black car, a driver in an impeccably white shirt and dark trousers was helping a short woman in a light dress load shopping bags into the trunk. Then he obligingly opened the rear passenger door for the lady, whose appearance left no doubt about her high status. Maggie, what's wrong? Lola waved her hand in front of her friend's face. Oh. Maisie shook her head sharply, squeezed her eyes shut. Lola, either there's something wrong with my eyesight, or I've completely lost my mind, she finally exhaled. But I swear, Ryan's ex just got into that car, that same drab little thing. No, that's just impossible. I wouldn't mistake her for anyone, Maggie objected. It's her, just with a different haircut, and in a dress that probably costs as much as her monthly salary at the hospital, and with a personal driver, Lola chuckled. No, Maggie, obviously, it's just a very similar young lady. Who would hire such an escort for a nurse living in a communal apartment? Maggie understood that there was common sense in her friend's words, but the image imprinted on her eyes a couple of minutes ago asserted the complete opposite. Could Ryan have been so mistaken? Could his ex-wife have turned into such a fashionable woman, riding in foreign cars with a personal chauffeur? So are we going? The taxi seems to be waiting, Lola asked, nodding in that direction. Yeah, her friend replied distractedly. Ryan surveyed his workspace. Perfect. Everything in its place. The monthly sales plan was exceeded. The bonus was already warming his pocket. The new manager, Jean, had settled in well, and the contract for the delivery of a fresh batch of cars was signed. On days like these, Ryan was in an excellent mood. He descended from the second floor, where his office with panoramic windows was located, to the first, and watched with satisfaction as the young employees bustled about, trying to please the clients. He immediately sent a young female employee for coffee, and lounging in her chair, began surveying his domain. Ryan had been the director of the car dealership for just under a year. He had come here himself years ago, young and full of ambition, and in 4 years he had rapidly climbed the career ladder to the very top. The doors of the dealership silently parted, and a visitor entered. Ryan saw the new manager immediately rush towards him. Having worked in sales for many years, Ryan had learned to distinguish wealthy clients from those who just came to look around, or worse, to get on his nerves. This man evoked an unconcealed feeling of disgust in Ryan. Dishevelled hair, stale jeans, carelessly rolled up sleeves of a simple, not-so-fresh shirt, dirty sneakers. Jean offered the man a catalogue, but he seemed to completely confuse the young employee. Ryan clicked his tongue in displeasure and decided to intervene. Jean, take a break for now. I'll handle this myself, he approached, nodded to the newcomer, temporarily taking over his duties. How can I help? Good afternoon, the customer greeted Ryan. I want to surprise my wife for her birthday, but I see you don't have the car in the colour I need. He named the car model and gestured around the spacious dealership hall. Ryan recalled that the specified colour was only available for the car in the top configuration, and it cost significantly more. Such cars were brought in exclusively by special order. Unfortunately, we don't have it in stock, but it can be ordered. If you make an advance payment of 30% of the cost, the waiting time is about 3 weeks. The director squinted, again assessing the customer with his gaze. No, that's too long, and if I pay the full cost right away, will it be faster? Ryan was astonished, but didn't betray his true attitude towards the visitor with a single muscle. Of course that's possible, but in that case, full prepayment will be required. He stretched his lips into a semblance of a smile. Then delivery will take only 5 days. We'll need to draw up a contract. Ryan waved his hand casually, and Jean obligingly handed him a folder with papers. The dealership director extended the contract to the customer. He quickly scanned the lines, turned the page, and then asked, It says here that in case of any problems with the car at the time of its transfer to the buyer, you are not responsible for it. Yes, Those are the terms for expedited delivery, Ryan confirmed. Are you offering me to buy a pig in a poke? The customer carefully closed the contract, shook his head in dissatisfaction, and returned the papers to the man standing before him. Thank you, but I'll look for a gift for my wife elsewhere. Good day. He turned around and walked confidently towards the exit. Ryan rolled his eyes and, clearly believing he wasn't heard, muttered to the retreating figure, "Going back to their village." The man froze in the doorway for a moment, but then left the car dealership building. "Remember, Jean," Ryan shoved the unused contract into the employee's hands. "Don't even waste your time on types like this. They have no money, but their demands are endless. And call the cleaner or something. Let her wipe the floors after him." That evening, Ryan picked up his wife. Maggie and Lola had spent the whole day together preparing for the upcoming social event. They had talked their fill, laughed a lot, and bought a ton of things. The couple's favourite pastime was gossiping about mutual acquaintances. "I swear on my new shoes that was your ex-wife," his wife stated confidently. Ryan listened to her with feigned interest, but winced and waved her off dismissively. Where would she get the money for shopping sprees like that and business-class taxis? Please, I won the apartment in court. A chicken like that will certainly not reach the chief doctor position. All she has left is a room in a communal apartment and a suitcase of old junk. What if she inherited something? Maggie suggested. Did you see their place in Oakwood? Her mother and father are crammed into a one-room apartment on the outskirts. Her grandmother signed over her room to her when she was 15. They haven't thought about her niece in a long time. In short, it's definitely not Allie. Calm down. Maggie somehow leaned back in her seat with satisfaction. Her husband's words calmed her. The thought that the ex-wife, whom she considered worthless, could afford to buy shoes in boutiques hurt her pride. No, she can't. End of story. Ryan, why did you even get involved with her? Couldn't you find anyone better? Maggie giggled. I was young and foolish, Ryan replied in the same vein. I wasn't very good at understanding women back then. As he said this, he took Maggie's hand and gently kissed her knuckles. Well, anyway, I'm now sure that my eyes deceived me in the parking lot today, Maggie concluded. And how was your day? She asked, leaning against her husband. A penniless, sloppy time waster dropped by the dealership after lunch, Ryan began. Often, life in some inexplicable way brings together people who are completely not meant for each other, and this incompatibility is visible to everyone except the lovers themselves. They don't notice how their views on the world diverge more and more, how friction and arguments arise more and more often, how much remains outside the threshold of their shared home, and how the person who once seemed the most beloved slips lower and lower on the list of priorities. Alice and Ryan met at the wedding of mutual friends. That evening, the 29-year-old nurse fell head over heels in love with the groom's attractive 30-year-old friend. They danced a lot, talked, drank too much, and spent the entire evening inseparable. And they left the celebration together. At that moment, both were single, slightly tipsy, and couldn't deny themselves the desire to spend the night together. A month later, Alice found out she was expecting a child. This news struck Ryan like a bolt from the blue. At that time, he worked in a small private shop selling bicycle equipment and was completely unprepared for a child. But some semblance of gentlemanly honour prevailed, and Ryan proposed to Alice. The wedding was rushed, without unnecessary preparations. However, the parents on both sides prepared a surprise that was almost enough to buy a new, spacious 2-room apartment. True, they had to take out a loan for the remaining part, but this seemed like such a trifle, as neither of the future parents had decent housing of their own. Ryan rented a modest one-room apartment. Alice lived in a communal apartment inherited from her grandmother. In short, they weren't exactly living the high life. It wasn't easy for either of them to adjust from their usual single lives to family life. But Alice loved Ryan blindly, and because of this love, she forgave him his harshness, rude words, and broken promises. Providence, however, had its own plans for this union. In the 4th month of her pregnancy, Alice lost the child. The woman herself was saved. She spent about a week in the hospital, but no one could name a clear reason for the tragedy. Alice, who had dreamed of becoming a mother, cried bitterly into her hospital pillow at night. Ryan, it seemed, wasn't too upset. On the contrary, he sighed with relief. After all, he had completely different plans. "We'll have children later," Alice said as she and her husband sat down for dinner. "My dear, what children are you talking about now? You almost killed the first one and you want to try again?" Ryan worked diligently with his fork, not looking at his wife. "Let's live for ourselves. Wait, get on our feet. You get a proper checkup." Alice nodded sadly. She decided to listen, because her husband was probably right. You shouldn't rush headlong into things like a blind kitten. You need to calm down. 2 years flew by under this pretext. Ryan was satisfied with everything. He had a convenient working wife, and he could fully concentrate on building his career. After visiting car dealerships, he realized that wealthy people bought cars. This meant he could earn significantly more if he gave it his all, and Ryan gave it his all. First, he became a senior manager, then deputy director. That's when he started looking at Alice with a certain degree of disgust. After all, at home, a dreary apartment always awaited him, and a wife who hadn't even changed her hairstyle once in 5 years. All she did was complain about hospital matters and the children they still didn't have. She had been running to doctors for years, and in free medicine, even with connections, everything happened agonizingly slowly. He was fed up. In the evenings, Ryan didn't even want to share a bed with his wife. Meanwhile, Ryan started earning well. He bought himself a respectable foreign car, acquired increasingly expensive suits, and more modern gadgets. He quickly paid off the loan for the apartment, and girls started showing him unambiguous signs of attention. Against the backdrop of these achievements, enveloped in the aura of success, his wife, with her melancholic and suffering mood, simply didn't fit in. In the end, Ryan started an affair with Mandy, a pretty girl who worked in the insurance company office next door. There was no need to hide their relationship, which quickly grew into a full-blown romance. Mandy wasn't at all bothered that her chosen one was married. She saw the disgust and disdain with which Ryan spoke of his wife, and she herself had seen her photos more than once, either on social media or elsewhere. Boring, in a cheap sweater, with a perpetual ponytail and a round face. Pitiful and plain. There was no need to specifically file for divorce. As soon as Ryan learned that he was being considered for the position of director of the car dealership, he realized that Alice, with her lamentations and drabness, had to be left in the past forever. He filed for divorce himself. His shocked wife looked at him with eyes full of tears, not understanding. "Why, Ryan? Why are you doing this to me?" "What? Taking revenge? You're a misunderstanding, a hospital moth. What can you give me? Nothing. You can't give birth. You can't even take care of yourself. Conclusion, you're drab as a moth yourself. Ugh, find someone on your level. I don't need a woman like that, and don't bother me with explanations anymore." Ryan began packing his things. Alice cried quietly while he rushed from the wardrobe to the chest of drawers. She couldn't grasp what was happening until the very end. She only understood when her ex-husband coldly won the apartment in court and ordered her to take her few belongings from the half-empty, once-loved apartment and go back to her grandmother's communal room. Her parents didn't have enough space even without her. So, literally within a few weeks, Alice transformed from a married woman into a plain, abandoned inhabitant of a communal apartment. "Well, we're home." She stood before the door of her room, holding a suitcase in one hand and a cat carrier in the other. "Now everything will be as before." Felix, the cat, rubbed his cheek against the bars of the carrier, showing that it didn't matter to him where they lived as long as he was with his beloved mistress. Stepping into the space of her former dwelling, Alice felt as though those years of marriage, the lost child, the divorce, and all the pain Ryan had caused her had never happened. The lilac curtains still fluttered cheerfully at the window, and the spout of a teapot from her grandmother's set peeked out from the sideboard. Alice sat down on the sofa, leaned back, and closed her eyes, listening to her feelings. She needed to gather her strength and start life with a clean slate. No one had promised it would be easy, but sitting and crying from her own helplessness was certainly not the answer. Life began anew, and how much would Alice have paid to chirp as carelessly as the sparrows outside the window? But instead, old wounds flared up in her soul like painful boils. She tried to understand why everything had happened that way. Periodically, her mother would add fuel to this smouldering fire of painful reflections. There was a man. He worked, didn't drink, didn't fool around. No, they got divorced. How should I know, Mum? Alice waved her off listlessly. You should have fought. You should have made a firm decision and sued again. Mum, leave me alone. Alice covered her ears with her hands like a child. I barely have the strength to get out of bed for work in the morning, let alone the strength to sue, and no money for a lawyer either. The conversation was exhausted, and it happened like this more than once. First, her mother pitied her, and then she started reproaching her, a pattern that was utterly tiresome. The only solace for Alice was work. She had been working as a nurse in a children's clinic for many years and loved her calling with all her heart. She dreamed of going further, entering residency, but she couldn't save up the necessary amount for tuition. 3 weeks had passed since Alice moved back into her old place. It felt unusual to return to a small room after a spacious apartment. However, instead of a perpetually gloomy husband, she was greeted there by Felix the cat with a joyful meow. And somehow, gradually, her heart felt warmer. The evening light of the fading day gently stroked the walls, leaving long shadows, and lit up the windows with fiery reflections. She remembered one evening. Alice was returning home from work. She had stayed late due to paperwork. To clear her head a bit, she decided to walk. As ill luck would have it, the path led past the car dealership where her ex-husband worked. To avoid disturbing her memory, to avoid spoiling her mood, Alice turned in another direction, further away. This made the path longer, but she didn't have to worry. Usually she liked to stroll, looking at the passing cars, shop windows, clouds in the sky, birds on wires, dogs dozing in the shade. And today Alice looked around, moving forward step by step. And suddenly her gaze fell upon something that didn't fit into the evening tranquility at all. Ahead in the parking lot, a car stood with its door ajar. It was surprising that no one but Alice noticed it. Hesitation didn't last a fraction of a second. The woman rushed into the parking lot and flung the car door wide open. A man sat almost unconscious in the driver's seat. He looked about 40, well-built, in a shirt and jeans, with a short, neat haircut. He was weakly hitting his head against the headrest. "Are you all right?" Alice asked. Instead of answering, the man opened his eyes with effort and began fumbling on the seat with a trembling hand. Then he pulled out an inhaler. Alice realized she hadn't been mistaken and that the stranger was having an asthma attack. She immediately unbuttoned his shirt collar to free his chest. The inhaler made a sharp, empty sound when pressed. "It's empty!" Alice cried out in horror. "I'll buy a new one right now. Just hold on, please. Calm down. Try to breathe through your nose." Leaning on the steering wheel, the man nodded weakly. Alice rushed across the road, ignoring the honking cars, curses, and beeping. In an adrenaline rush, she didn't even look at the traffic light. The pharmacy was located around the corner, a few minutes' walk away. The nurse burst in, dishevelled, with wild, panic-filled eyes. "An inhaler, quickly! Someone is unwell!" she cried out as soon as she saw the pharmacist behind the glass. 30 seconds later, the terminal beeped, signalling the completion of the purchase. Alice rushed back to the parking lot just as quickly. Fortunately, the man's condition hadn't worsened, and he was conscious. Before Alice's eyes, the ailment began to recede. "I don't even know how to thank you," the man said when his breathing returned to normal and his cheeks were flushed with colour. "I thought I was saying goodbye to life right here." "You shouldn't be so careless about your illness," Alice said worriedly. "You can die from asthma. It's best to have extra inhalers and always keep them handy. You scared me terribly." "With my busy schedule, I sometimes forget my own name, let alone buy an inhaler," the stranger smiled awkwardly. "Well, yes, you're right, of course. You don't joke with illnesses like this." He paused for a moment, looking at something on the dashboard. "Allow me to drive you home. It's already dark. It's not very safe to walk alone on the streets at this time," he offered. Alice looked at her interlocutor carefully. "Are you sure you're feeling all right? Maybe with driving?" She looked the man up and down, as if fearing another attack. "I assure you, I'm perfectly fine now and quite capable of turning the wheel and pressing the pedals," the car owner smiled. "Oh, I suppose I'll agree," Alice sighed and nodded, "but please don't rush." The car smoothly pulled out onto the street. Alice suddenly understood why she had agreed. She herself felt not quite well, as if she had experienced something more than just saving a person. Suddenly, the man slapped his forehead with his palm, so sharply that the woman even flinched. "On the passenger seat. You saved my life, and I didn't even ask your name." The driver turned to her. "What can I say? Quite the gentleman." Alice smiled and gave her name. "Very nice to meet you. I'm Caleb," her interlocutor introduced himself. "Are you really a doctor?" "A nurse," Alice corrected. "I was just coming home from work when I saw you." A casual conversation started on its own. About work, about the approaching summer, about miraculous cases of rescue. Just like that, the car pulled up to the entrance of the courtyard where Alice lived. "Thank you for the ride," she nodded gratefully, getting out of the car. "Nonsense. I should be thanking you," Caleb fumbled in the glove compartment. "Here, take this. If you need anything, call me. I'm always happy to help." He handed her a business card. "And you? Please take care of yourself." He tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "It's not certain I'll be around next time." Instead of answering, Alice smiled and nodded, promising to follow his advice. Only when the car disappeared in the distance under the streetlight did Alice finally think to examine the business card she had received. The paper stated that in the parking lot she had saved the owner of a large agricultural machinery enterprise, Caleb V. Rybakoff. Maggie's morning began around noon. Her head was still buzzing from the champagne she had drunk the night before. Bags from yesterday's shopping were piled up on the bedroom chair. Ryan had left early. His side of the bed was already cold. She needed to get going, get herself together, and in the evening go to the salon to trim her ends and refresh her hair colour. At the upcoming engagement party for her husband's acquaintances, she intended to shine brighter than anyone else. Half an hour and 2 fizzy hangover tablets later, there was no trace of the hangover. Maggie sat at the kitchen bar counter on a high stool, drinking coffee and waiting for the fabric mask to do its job. I should check on the laptop who Ryan's friend is and for whom he's throwing such a party, she muttered to herself, clicking the mouse. A few clicks, and the internet obligingly opened the page of a certain Michael Baker. After examining the content, Maggie understood that he and Ryan had once studied together, and after Michael's recent purchase of a car at Ryan's dealership, they were actively communicating again. Michael, judging by the photos in the business album, had his own PR agency. Maggie scrolled further and stumbled upon the young businessman's fiancée. Roxanne. Well, she's not bad, interesting, she commented to herself, looking at the miniature blonde in the photo. I'll have to pretend I know something about her. The mouse clicked again, scrolling through new virtual frames. And then a sight opened up to her that she had not expected to see. Another photo, apparently taken in an expensive restaurant, showed Michael with his fiancée, an older unknown man, and Ryan's ex-wife. Maggie first peered closely, squeezed her eyes shut tightly, shook her head, and looked at the laptop again. Nothing had changed. The photo remained just as clear, and Alice in it was just as cheerful and beautiful. Maggie thought for a moment that the photo was old, taken before Ryan's marriage. However, the publication date of the photo eloquently stated the opposite, 7 months ago. "No, this can't be," the woman exclaimed loudly into the empty apartment. "It cannot." For about 10 minutes, Maggie was in a kind of daze. She would look at the photo, then minimize it. Her experienced eye assessed Alice's dress, her jewellery, and her hairstyle and makeup. All of this was clearly beyond the means of a poor nurse. In the end, the apartment's owner tried to find out something about the man who was so tenderly putting his arm around Alice's waist in the photo. But there was no tag on the picture, and Maggie couldn't find anyone similar among Michael's friends. Curiosity and anger came from somewhere, mixing into an explosive cocktail. First, the woman grabbed her phone and was about to call Ryan, but she thought better of it in time. Her husband would hardly appreciate her hysteria. Ryan didn't like talking about his ex-wife and past life, especially now that he held such a high position. But curiosity continued to gnaw at Maggie. Her ego was seriously wounded. It didn't matter that she had taken her husband, not at all. But looking worse than yesterday's ragamuffin, the former insurance worker, was truly unbearable. A small freckled boy sat on his grandmother's lap and listened as she quietly read him fairy tales from a colourful book. This touching scene unfolded right in the clinic corridor. Children in the waiting room were fussy, but the grandmother and grandson seemed not to notice any of it, sitting in the corner on a worn couch, immersed in their magical world. "Alice, are you here?" someone called from behind. Lost in thought, the woman instantly shook off the blissful drowsiness that had come over her. "Are you all right?" Her colleague Tara looked into Alice's face. Yes, I'm sorry." The woman finally shook off her dreamy mood and turned to her interlocutor. "Did you want something?" "Yes," Tara shook her head irritably. "My husband is on the phone. We're buying last-minute tickets. There's absolutely no time to wait, and Eleanor urgently needs her medical chart. Here, I can't find it." The registration office said that some of the shelves weren't unpacked after the rearrangement, and they're in the storage room downstairs near the trauma centre. As a favour, Alice, help me out. Find that cursed chart for Eleanor. Tara shoved a piece of paper with the name on it into her hand and made a pleading face. Okay, but you have to treat me to candy later, Alice agreed. Anyway, I'm on break right now. Tara beamed and happily fluttered away, hotly discussing something on the phone. Alice decided not to waste time at the registration office and went straight to look for the medical chart in the hospital storage room. The trauma centre was on the first floor, but had a separate entrance. Alice quickly walked around the building and found herself near the trauma centre, where on one side was the reception room and on the other the X-ray room. The corridor was not empty. Several people were sitting in the queue, a high school boy with a bandaged arm, a man about 40, holding ice to his left palm. Alice walked past and was reaching for the storage room door when she heard a familiar voice behind her. Dennis, your hand has gone completely white. Take the ice off, or the doctor will think you have frostbite, not a fracture. The woman turned around and met the gaze of the speaker. Alice, is that really you? Caleb rose from his chair in surprised delight. It hasn't even been a couple of days. Small world. Alice laughed. How did you end up here? I hope the inhaler has nothing to do with it. Her heart warmed pleasantly. Meeting Caleb the last time had left her with a light, joyful feeling. It's like finding a long-lost but cherished item. Oh no, not at all. My son was waving his arms around at football practice last night, and waved them so much that I think he broke his fingers on the metal goal. Caleb ruffled the boy's hair, who was holding a bag of ice. We first went to the private clinic where we always get school certificates, but it turns out their X-ray machine is broken. They gave us a referral here. Well, and here we are, waiting. Oh, speedy recovery, Alice smiled at the boy. So what are you waiting for? Let me ask them to see you without waiting. No, we'll wait, Caleb stopped her. You've already done too much for me recently. Dennis is a real man now. He can bear it. He's not a baby. He looked at his son, and the boy in response puffed out his cheeks and furrowed his brows. Alice smiled. It was nice to see you, but work is waiting, she shrugged apologetically. She was about to leave when Caleb stopped her. Alice, would you mind? Well, I'd like to invite you to dinner tomorrow, the man blurted out. Her cheeks somehow flushed. Okay, she forced a casual tone. What time and where? 7 o'clock. Let's meet at the main entrance of Northern Park, and we'll decide there, Caleb replied. All right, well, see you then. Alice awkwardly extended her hand for a goodbye handshake. See you tomorrow. Caleb also slightly awkwardly but gently squeezed her palm. The medical chart for the needed patient was found surprisingly quickly. Alice diligently tried to distract herself with work, but her heart kept singing and singing. The woman wasn't building any impossible dreams, but she understood that men don't invite you to dinner just out of politeness. Caleb liked her, and she liked him. Leaving the storage room 15 minutes later, Alice saw that Caleb and his son were still waiting in the corridor. She lowered her head and cautiously slipped into the traumatologist's office anyway. Dr. Leo V., Alice addressed the elderly doctor. There's a boy in the corridor with broken fingers, a friend's son. Please do your best for him. I'll thank you. I won't forget. Ali, why didn't you say something? The doctor looked up from his papers and waved his hand. Of course we will. Call them in. Alice went out and nodded towards the office door for Caleb and Dennis. The man looked at her gratefully and hurried with his son to the appointment. What a wonderfully beautiful day, Alice said to herself when she was outside again. It suddenly seemed to her that the sun was shining brighter, The flowers in the hospital flower bed were more lush, and the air was suddenly filled with the scent of hope and pleasant anticipation. That summer evening on the restaurant terrace by the park pond, Alice learned that the gentle man she had saved turned out to be a 30-year-old widower raising a son alone. Alice felt awkward asking her new acquaintance about his work, and he himself didn't tell her for a long time that he managed a huge enterprise. Although the woman understood that she was being courted by far from a student boy, she didn't fully realize how wealthy Caleb was. But it didn't matter to her, because next to him she felt as if she was floating above the ground. Dennis didn't accept her right away, but when he did, Alice felt that her long-held dreams of having children had suddenly come true. She enjoyed walking with the boy, holding his hand, buying sweets, praising him, or just telling him something interesting. Caleb would just smile quietly at such moments, watching how quickly the people dearest to him found common ground. 4 months passed unnoticed like this. Despite her beloved's pleas, Alice didn't agree to move into his luxurious apartment, although she often stayed over. Caleb spoiled her with gifts and gave her flowers. But having been burned once, Alice still feared losing her personal space completely somewhere deep inside. But when Caleb proposed to her at a restaurant right on his cousin's birthday, Alice finally melted. With tears in her eyes, she whispered, "Yes." There were many congratulations, photos for memory, but the happy woman's eyes shone brighter than any jewelry. "How can I lose the one who saved my life but stole my heart?" Caleb whispered in her ear as they danced in the dim light of the banquet hall. In winter, a quiet but elegant wedding took place, to which only the closest people were invited. After that, Caleb took his wife to the Azure coast, leaving his son in his grandmother's care. Alice secretly couldn't believe she could be so incredibly lucky, as if she had stepped into a fairy tale. The superstitious woman carefully guarded her new happiness and didn't share many details with anyone. Although she was questioned by friends, her mother, and former colleagues from work. And why former? Caleb helped her get a job at a prestigious private children's clinic, where the pay was higher and the attitude towards employees was completely different. At first, he wanted his wife to only take care of the house and herself, but Alice objected. She loved her calling and wasn't going to give it up. In the end, her husband paid for her residency so she could achieve greater results in her career. Alice sold the communal apartment she inherited from her grandmother and put the money in the bank to earn interest, as her husband had advised. As for the cat, he lived with Ronnie, Max, and their family, who were friendly and happy. For a long time, Alice didn't dare to tell Caleb about her first marriage. It was awkward, painful, and somehow shameful. Chance helped. One evening, the couple was returning home and listening quietly to the radio in the car. The announcer enthusiastically broadcast the news to listeners that a gang had finally been caught in the city that had been taking apartments from elderly people using various scams. "Well, they're taking the last from pensioners," Alice sighed, and then, without fully realizing what she was doing, she said, "How I sympathize with those poor old people. I was almost in the same situation myself." "Someone sued you for your apartment?" A surprised Caleb even turned to his wife. "And you didn't say anything?" "Well, it was my ex-husband," Alice hesitated. "They helped. In short, he got the apartment all to himself. According to the law, property should have been divided equally. Strange, very strange. In any case, I was unhappy in that apartment and was even glad to get rid of it." Alice gave a strained smile, trying to close the topic as quickly as possible. Caleb was silent for a moment, and then suddenly asked about plans for the upcoming weekend. "One problem less," Her husband thoughtfully smoothed his moustache. He always strived to act honestly and openly. That's how he conducted business, how he communicated with partners, how he raised his son. And what had happened in his wife's life, even before he appeared, made Caleb's gut churn and compelled him to get to the truth. "What? You asked about the weekend," the man remembered. "Why don't you go shopping? Maybe buy a new dress?" Alice turned to her husband and stared in disbelief. Caleb loved her, was a caring and attentive husband, but something like this. Sending her shopping himself. "Oh, you're being cagey," she squinted slightly. "I am," Caleb laughed, deliberately mispronouncing the word, my perceptive one. "Are we going somewhere?" Alice guessed. "Yes," the man confirmed. "Michael finally proposed to his lady. He wants to throw a party in 2 weeks. We're invited, of course, although I'd gladly just go to a bar with him rather than pretend to be polite all evening." "Hey, why didn't we have an engagement party?" Alice joked. Caleb looked at her as if the woman had just thrown a wad of cash out the window. "Because we're not obsessed with TV shows like Michael's future wife. I bet she'll be hosting dinner parties and parties for any reason. Bought a new sofa, got to invite guests, got a dog, open champagne, hung a painting, launch fireworks." Caleb got worked up. Alice couldn't help but burst into laughter. "What a grumbler you are," she said, wiping tears from her eyes. "Maybe it will be fun and you'll like it." "I hope so," the man agreed amicably. "But in any case, you have to be my star at that party. So on the weekend, I'll call Leonard, take him for the whole day. Let him drive you around the shopping centres and help you carry the purchases." "I'll probably never get used to this," Alice murmured. "I can't accompany you on shopping trips myself, and I don't understand anything about it." Caleb stroked her hand. "So let my trusted person be with you so I don't worry." All right, Alice agreed. She still felt awkward about so much care and was shy about going to brand boutiques. However, her husband's confident voice and his support gradually helped her cope with this. Time moved forward relentlessly. There was less and less time until the planned evening. Caleb's work increased during the warm season as fieldwork began and farmers were actively purchasing agricultural machinery. The man tried to be at the enterprise and in the huge sales pavilion daily. The phone rang constantly. Sometimes he needed to go to the bank, sometimes meet with suppliers of assembly machines, sometimes control purchases, sometimes sign papers. In such a rush, Caleb almost forgot that Alice's birthday was just 2 days after his cousin's engagement party. The man had long decided that his wife should have her own car, as it wasn't always possible to call Leonard. Caleb spent a long time choosing a car model for his wife, comparing and evaluating. In the end, he chose one, but he just couldn't find the time to actually buy it. And when he looked at the calendar and realized he might not make it at all and end up in a pickle, he decided to combine business with pleasure. That day, there were representatives from the design and manufacturing plant at the factory. When all the materials were finally filmed and the interviews taken, it was about 3 p.m. Figuring there was nothing else to do, he just had to wait patiently and be careful on the road. The car ahead went to overtake a slowly chugging truck. Caleb was about to follow suit, but some internal intuitive feeling stopped him. And as it turned out, not in vain. A Kamaz truck appeared out of nowhere in the oncoming lane. The car that had gone to overtake swerved sharply, trying to get back into its lane, but one wheel went onto the shoulder. It spun and was dragged into the ditch. The truck screeched as it slammed on the brakes. Caleb himself was already slowing down, simultaneously watching the damaged car. By some miracle, it didn't flip over on the steep slope and left deep ruts in the ground from its wheels, indicating the driver's desperate attempts to save himself. Caleb, without losing a second, rushed to the car. The truck driver followed him. "Are you alive? Is everything okay?" Caleb peered into the open driver's door window. A young man was sitting there. He was gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles were white, but fortunately he was unharmed. In the passenger seat, a girl was pressing her palm to her nose. Red drops were dripping through her fingers onto her t-shirt. "Alive, thank God," the young man exhaled nervously, "though for a second I thought we weren't. The seatbelt saved us." "Did anyone break anything? Hit your head? I'll bring the first aid kit now." Caleb looked around anxiously. "My leg. I think I broke it, but I'm not sure," the girl said with difficulty, tilting her head back. "I hit my face on the dashboard." Caleb made sure the couple didn't have any serious, life-threatening injuries and hurried back to his car. Meanwhile, the truck driver also approached the car, asked the driver something, and checked the hood from below. While Caleb was helping the passenger treat the abrasions on her cheek, the driver of the damaged car and the elderly truck driver were attaching a tow rope. "Now we'll pull your beauty out," the old man gave a thumbs up, getting into the truck. "Just need a little push. It's turned around a lot." A couple of minutes later, Caleb rolled up his shirt sleeves and began pushing the car from behind, while the driver gave it gas. Grass and dirt flew from under the rear wheels, staining his jeans and sneakers. With a strained groan, the car awkwardly turned and slowly crawled after its tow vehicle. When it was back on the road and the hazard lights were flashing, the old man turned off his iron horse, detached the rope, and threw it into the truck bed. "Well, off you go. Just drive slower and to the nearest workshop. Let them check the stabilizer links, brakes, and tires there," he instructed the young man, who kept thanking him. "Thank you so much." The young man shook the old man's hand. "It's nothing. Any decent person would do the same," he replied. "Would you like me to drive you to the city if it's on my way?" he offered. The girl, calling out to the old man who was still being thanked, whispered something to him. He nodded in agreement. They all said goodbye and finally got into their cars. The friendly villager turned off at the next corner, giving 3 loud honks as a farewell signal. Caleb drove behind the new acquaintances, keeping his distance. They reached the city, where the couple no longer needed escort or insurance. When Caleb finally let his fellow travellers go and arrived at the car dealership building, it was already almost 5 in the evening. The man looked at himself in the rearview mirror and even smiled slightly. After a whole day in the field and road adventures, he himself looked like someone from the nearest village. His hair was messy, his jeans were stained with grass and dirt. But there was simply no time to change. After tidying himself up as best he could with wet wipes and water from a bottle, Caleb took his wallet and headed for the dealership entrance. "Caleb, I've never been to events like this. I feel awkward," Alice whispered to her husband as soon as they entered the gate at the specified address. The country villa where the party was held really looked as if it had stepped off a foreign film screen. White walls with stained glass windows, 2 floors, a well-kept yard with exotic plants and white stone paved paths, a small garden, a pool with lighting around which tables with food and drinks were arranged buffet style. Nearby, DJ equipment was piled up. Twinkling strings of lights and lanterns stretched across the entire territory, illuminating every corner. Guests who had already arrived stood here and there with glasses of champagne in their hands, chatting. Laughter could be heard. Men in trousers or jeans and shirts, ladies in evening gowns and high heels. "You look the best here, stop it." Caleb took his wife's hand and pointed to her reflection in the window glass. A slender miniature brunette looked back at him with a beautiful, slightly messy bun, wearing a white strap dress that emphasized her figure, and bright emerald pumps, complemented by an embroidered clutch of the same colour. She looked at her husband gratefully and smiled. Together they headed towards the pool, where most of the guests had gathered. "You're late," Michael smiled warmly and hugged Caleb. "Alice, you look stunning." Michael's fiancée, Roxanne, immediately appeared nearby. "Give me your hairdresser's number later." Their casual social conversation was interrupted by a guest who approached Michael from behind. He turned around, replied something, and then addressed Caleb and Alice again. "By the way, I've been meaning to introduce you to my cousin, my college friend." Michael stepped aside, letting the approaching guests pass. Alice gasped and grabbed her husband's elbow. He, in turn, raised his eyebrows in surprise. The greeting he hadn't yet spoken hung in the air. "And this is my cousin Caleb, the owner of the Russ plant, and his wife Alice," Michael continued. Suddenly, Michael's phone rang, and throwing a brief "excuse me," the host of the party hurried away to answer the call. Roxanne was immediately pulled away by a group of friends. When Michael returned a minute later, his guests were still standing there, drilling each other with their gazes. "Did something happen while I was gone?" he asked. "We seem to know each other," Ryan replied gloomily. He felt Maggie frozen like a stone beside him, and the thin glass in her fingers almost bursting from tension. Ryan recognized the demanding villager customer in the guest standing before him, and with difficulty recognized his ex-wife in his companion. Maggie pursed her lips. She saw that Alice looked nothing like a poor ragamuffin, and felt that she had thoroughly put her foot in it. After all, her worst fears had come true. Both Alice's dress and shoes were clearly more expensive and of better quality, and the ring with the impressive stone on her ring finger spoke more eloquently than anything else. "Known each other? Wonderful. Then you'll definitely have something to talk about, and the host urgently needs me. Enjoy yourselves and don't deny yourselves anything." Michael hurried away. "Well, a lovely evening, isn't it?" Caleb tried to diffuse the situation, addressing Ryan. He understood who was before him, but was in no hurry to show it. "Simply magnificent," Maggie hissed through clenched teeth and kicked her husband in the wrist. He winced, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. The situation was becoming increasingly awkward. Fortunately for all four, someone behind the group awkwardly bumped into a string of lanterns, and it fell onto a table, taking a dozen glasses with it. The sound of breaking glass was heard. Taking advantage of the confusion, Ryan and Maggie hurried away to another part of the yard. "If you want to leave, Caleb squeezed Alice's hand. "No," the woman refused. "I'm not going to satisfy my ex-husband's ego." Caleb kissed his wife on the cheek and, putting his arm around her, led her to the drinks table. Throughout the party, the couples kept their distance from each other and tried not to cross paths during contests or while socializing with other guests. The party was fun, with a disco, prize draws, karaoke songs, and lots of jokes. In the midst of the celebration, Michael and Roxanne announced that they were inviting all guests to the wedding as well. "Oh, it's so hot," Alice sat down on the edge of a small fountain in the garden. "I never thought such expensive shoes could rub my foot so much. It hurts." Caleb knelt in front of her and helped her take off her shoes. "Yes, that's a nasty blister. Okay, I'll go get a plaster and some cold water, and you sit here for now." "And I won't go far anyway. With one shoe?" Alice smiled and shrugged. The feeling of constraint after meeting Ryan and his companion had almost left her. The woman relaxed and dipped her hand into the fountain basin. It was approaching midnight, and the party was soon to end with a fireworks display. "Are you relaxing?" Ryan approached the fountain. Let's say I am. Alice stared at him guardedly. Why are you here? I thought it was clear to everyone that we're not eager to talk to each other. Inside her, the usual lump tightened, cutting off her soul from memories, but the woman forced them away. Oh, come on, Allie, Ryan smiled sickly and slightly drunkenly. We're on equal terms now. Why be enemies? I don't think your wife would like that idea. Alice nodded towards the main group of guests. And I'm not going to ask her. I'm my own boss. Ryan proudly lifted his chin. Alice remained silent, just watching him. She suddenly felt so disgusted and amused at the same time. What did she ever see in this smug turkey that made her suffer all night long after he left her? Listen, let's forget old grievances. Ryan came so close that Alice felt physically uncomfortable and she instinctively moved away. Fortunately, Caleb was already hurrying towards them along the path. What grievances are we talking about? He stood so as to shield Alice. Perhaps about you bribing the judge when dividing the joint apartment a year ago? Ryan recoiled and froze as if he had been hit with a dust bag. And Caleb handed his wife a glass of ice water and continued. Or perhaps about you and your employees needing to brush up on your sales ethics. About how to talk to clients who aren't like you. So, what specific grievances were you planning to discuss with my wife? I'll go, excuse me, Ryan mumbled. The alcohol he had drunk turned the narcissist into a pathetic weed. The former car dealership director stumbled and hurried away. What a worthless scoundrel, Caleb sighed. You should have taken your rightful half of the apartment. I have a trusted and very strong lawyer. He'll tear someone like that apart. Caleb, no need. Alice placed her palm on his forearm. I don't want to get back into that swamp. Let him choke on that apartment. Life will punish him itself. And how did you find out about everything? Caleb sat down next to her and smoothed a few stray strands of hair on Alice's forehead. I told you I have a lawyer friend. He squinted mysteriously. He used his connections, talked to the right people, dug into the case, showed me photos. I see, the woman drawled, glancing sideways. And what's all that nonsense about cars and sales ethics? Oh, just looking for a gift for your birthday, Caleb confessed. A gift? At a car dealership? Wait, don't tell me that. Alice stared at her husband in astonishment, grasping the meaning. Tomorrow, it's all tomorrow, Caleb laughed, hugging his wife. Leave me at least some chance for a surprise. Claps sounded above their heads, and the sky was lit up with bright red and yellow splashes. Alice watched the fireworks, and it seemed to her as if they were painting the night just for her, as if in these bright flashes her old self had burned away, fearful, timid, and dependent on the opinion of a man who had never loved her. After some time, for Alice's sake, Caleb also said goodbye to Michael and his fiancée, thanking them for the warm reception. Her foot still ached from the uncomfortable shoe. Even the miraculously found plaster didn't help. It still hurts to walk, Alice sighed, leaning on her husband. It's okay, we'll get to the car now. I'll carry you if you want, Caleb smiled. Somewhere in the distance, Maggie's gloomy, displeased face flashed, and next to her, Ryan's drawn face. But Alice no longer cared about them. Caleb carefully opened the car door and gently seated Alice right in the passenger seat. I feel a little dizzy, she said. You're lying, Caleb couldn't help but say. Alice, why are you looking like that? My dear, you're suddenly feeling unwell. You've been drinking champagne for the second week. You've gone off coffee, which is a good thing, by the way. Caleb began listing with a slight smile. It seems you've given yourself the main gift for tomorrow. Alice looked at him disbelievingly at first, then at her hands and at her reflection in the rearview mirror. How did I not feel it? She murmured, and suddenly understood everything. Caleb immediately hugged his wife tightly, stroking her hair. "Let's go home, my joy," he said tenderly. The night city sped past the car window, somewhere serene and already asleep, and somewhere still noisy and bright. Alice dozed off, resting her head on her husband's shoulder. But even in her sleep, a serene smile did not leave her lips. Tomorrow would be a wonderful day, and after that, another and another. And every new dawn would be like this, when dreams slowly come true, and the hand holding yours belongs to a beloved and loving person.